Walking is supposed to be the safest thing you can do for your body after 60. Every doctor says it. Every wellness article says it. 30 minutes a day they tell you. Get outside. Move your body. Walking is low impact. It's gentle on the joints. It's the exercise almost anyone can do, regardless of fitness level. And so people walk, faithfully, consistently, with genuine commitment to their health. And then, somewhere in the progression of weeks and months and years of doing the thing they were told was helping them, the knees begin to tell a different story. A dull ache that shows up during the walk and lingers after. A stiffness that has become part of waking up. A creak and a grinding that was not there 2 years ago. A gradual reduction in how far they can comfortably go before the discomfort asks them to stop. And they blame the arthritis. They blame the aging cartilage. They blame time and genetics and the accumulated weight of a lifetime on these joints. What almost nobody tells them is that the walking itself, done the specific wrong ways that most people never examine because nobody ever examined them for it, may be contributing to the very damage they are trying to prevent. This is not an argument against walking. Walking done correctly is genuinely one of the most joint protective, life-extending, metabolically beneficial activities available to people over 60. But walking done incorrectly, with the specific mechanical errors that develop unconsciously over years, and that become more damaging with age, as the surrounding muscle and connective tissue loses its ability to compensate, creates repetitive loading patterns on the knee joint that accelerate exactly the kind of cartilage wear, ligament stress, and inflammatory response that people are attributing to age. The difference between walking that protects your knees and walking that quietly destroys them is not intensity, and it is not distance. It is 7 specific mechanical errors that most people make without ever knowing it, because no one has ever watched them walk closely enough to name them. If knowing these 7 mistakes before they go any further is the kind of information you want in your hands, hit like and subscribe right now. Dr. Victor Lang built this channel to close exactly this kind of gap, the gap between what is causing the problem and what the problem is being attributed to, because the gap is where the damage lives. Let us close it. The first mistake is one of the most universal and the most consequential, and it starts before the first full step is even taken. It is walking with the feet turned out, the toes pointing outward rather than forward, in the pattern that physical therapists call external rotation at the hip, and that most people simply call the way they walk. This external rotation is so common in older adults that it is often assumed to be normal. It is not normal in the biomechanical sense, and it is not benign in the joint health sense. When the foot is turned out during the walking stride, the knee does not track directly forward over the foot the way it is designed to. Instead, the knee swings slightly inward toward the midline of the body, while the foot points outward, creating a rotational stress at the knee joint called a valgus torque. This rotational stress is applied to the medial compartment of the knee, where the medial collateral ligament, the medial meniscus, and the medial cartilage surface bear the brunt of the abnormal load. Over thousands of steps across a regular walking routine, this mismatch between the direction the foot is pointing and the direction the knee is tracking creates a repetitive grinding stress on the very structures that, once worn, produce the chronic medial knee pain and the progressive medial compartment osteoarthritis that are among the most common orthopedic complaints in adults over 60. The correction is not complicated, but it requires conscious attention until the new pattern becomes automatic. Walk with the toes pointed directly forward, not at 10 and 2 like a duck, but straight ahead. This single adjustment begins to realign the knee tracking immediately and reduces the rotational stress on the medial compartment with every step. The second mistake involves something that most people who are trying to walk for fitness actively do, because they associate it with effort and calorie burn, and it is taking strides that are too long. In the cultural image of purposeful, healthy walking, the stride is long and the pace feels powerful. But from a knee biomechanics standpoint, an overextended stride creates a heel strike pattern that sends a shock wave up the kinetic chain from the heel through the ankle, through the knee, and into the hip with each step. When the heel lands significantly in front of the body's center of mass, the knee is forced to absorb a braking force it was not designed to manage repeatedly. In young athletes with strong surrounding musculature, the muscles absorb most of this shock before it reaches the cartilage. In older adults whose quadriceps, hamstrings, and calf muscles have lost some of their shock-absorbing mass and tone, more of the impact force transfers directly to the cartilage and the subchondral bone beneath it. Research on gait patterns and knee joint load consistently shows that reducing stride length and increasing cadence taking more frequent shorter steps at the same pace rather than fewer longer ones, significantly reduces the peak impact force reaching the knee per step. The efficient walking stride for joint protection lands the foot beneath or very slightly ahead of the body's center of mass, not far out in front, with a midfoot or forefoot contact rather than a hard heel strike. The third mistake is one that feels completely invisible while it is happening because it occurs in the seconds before the walk begins, and it involves the surface people choose to walk on without considering what that surface does to their knee over the course of a long walk. Hard, flat concrete is one of the most common walking surfaces in both urban and suburban environments, and it is also one of the most joint demanding, because concrete has virtually zero shock absorption. Every step on concrete returns the full impact force to the body without any cushioning from the surface itself. Compare this to a firm dirt path, a rubberized track, or even well-maintained asphalt, each of which has slightly more give than pure concrete, and the cumulative force reaching the knee over a 30-minute walk differs meaningfully. For people with early knee changes, repeatedly choosing hard concrete over softer surfaces adds a compounding impact load that the knee is managing on top of whatever biomechanical stresses the other mistakes are already creating. Where possible, varying the surface, choosing packed trails, rubberized tracks, grass when the terrain is stable, reduces the mechanical demand on the knee without reducing the benefit of the walk itself. The fourth mistake goes deeper than mechanics and into territory that surprises most people when they first encounter it, because it involves what happens in the 20 minutes before the walk starts. Specifically, the mistake is walking on a cold, unstretched knee with tight hip flexors and tight iliotibial bands that have been compressed by hours of sitting. The iliotibial band, commonly called the IT band, is a thick connective tissue structure running along the outer thigh from the hip to the knee. When it is tight, which it becomes through prolonged sitting, and through the natural reduction in tissue flexibility that accompanies aging, it creates a lateral pull on the knee during walking that shifts the contact pattern of the joint surfaces, increasing stress on the lateral compartment of the knee and reducing the space in which the kneecap tracks within its femoral groove. Beginning a walk with these tight structures and expecting them to loosen up mid-stride is a pattern that puts the most vulnerable first minutes of the walk, when the joint is cold and the structures are least pliable, in exactly the highest stress configuration. A 5-minute standing warm-up before walking that includes gentle hip circles, standing quadriceps stretches, calf raises, and a slow step side-to-side movement to bring the knee through its range of motion before it is loaded at pace, changes the mechanical environment of the first steps of every walk. It is one of the simplest and most evidence-supported interventions for reducing impact-related knee stress in older walkers. The fifth mistake is the one that is hardest to name without sounding counterintuitive, and it is walking too far without sufficient muscular support. Not too far in terms of distance for cardiovascular reasons, but too far relative to the current fatigue threshold of the muscles surrounding the knee, specifically the quadriceps. The quadriceps are the primary shock absorbers for the knee joint. They contract eccentrically during each step to slow the rate at which the knee bends under load, absorbing the impact force that would otherwise transmit directly to the cartilage. As the quadriceps fatigue during a long walk, their shock-absorbing function degrades. The knee begins to receive more of the impact force directly. The contact pressure on the cartilage increases, and the final portion of a walk that has gone past the muscular fatigue threshold is doing more joint damage per step than any portion before it. Research on walkers with knee osteoarthritis has documented that joint loading increases measurably in the final stages of walks that have pushed past muscular endurance capacity. The practical implication is not to walk less. It is to build quadriceps strength specifically through seated leg extensions, step-ups, and wall sits, so that the muscular support for the knee is available for the full duration of the walk, rather than fading in the second half and leaving the cartilage unsupported. The sixth mistake is one that has become more common as walking with phones has become universal, and it involves the position of the head and neck during the walk. Most people looking down at a phone, or even simply walking with the head held slightly forward of the body's center of gravity in the way that decades of desk work and screen time have created as a postural default, are generating a forward head position that affects the entire kinetic chain below it. The head weighs approximately 10 to 12 pounds, and when it is held even 2 or 3 inches forward of its neutral position over the shoulders, the effective load it creates on the structures below it multiplies significantly. The resulting postural compensation travels down the spine into the pelvis, altering the mechanics of the hip and subsequently the knee. Research on the relationship between forward head posture and lower extremity biomechanics shows measurable increases in knee adduction moment, the same medial knee loading that the turned-out foot creates, in people walking with habitual forward head position compared to those walking with neutral cervical alignment. Walking with the chin parallel to the ground, the ears directly over the shoulders, and the gaze forward rather than down corrects this postural chain effect and reduces the downstream loading on the knee that most people would never think to connect to the position of their head. The seventh mistake is perhaps the most emotionally resonant on this entire list, because it involves the one thing that people who love walking and who are managing knee pain are most reluctant to accept as part of the problem. It is walking through the pain. Not the discomfort of effort, not the mild awareness of muscles working that is entirely normal and healthy, but the actual pain signal that arrives during the walk and that most people push through because stopping feels like defeat, because the doctor said to stay active, because they have convinced themselves that some pain is part of the process. The knee's pain signal during walking is not random neurology. It is a communication from the joint environment that something in the loading pattern has exceeded the tissue's tolerance at that moment. It might be inflammation in the bursa. It might be excessive pressure on a specific cartilage surface. It might be the ligament at its elastic limit. Continuing to load a joint that is actively signaling distress accelerates the inflammatory cascade and the micro damage that, over time, compounds into the structural changes visible on imaging as cartilage loss and joint space narrowing. The research on pain through it versus pain-modified walking in people with knee osteoarthritis is unambiguous. Walking to the point where pain begins and then modifying, reducing pace, shortening distance, adjusting technique, produces better long-term outcomes than walking through the pain to maintain distance targets. Pain is the joint's veto. Overriding the veto consistently is not toughness. It is a vote in the wrong direction. The thread connecting all 7 of these mistakes is the same truth stated 7 different ways. The knee is an extraordinarily engineered joint, capable of absorbing millions of loading cycles across a lifetime when those cycles are applied correctly. The cartilage has no blood supply and depends entirely on the mechanical pumping action of proper walking mechanics to move nutrients in and waste products out of its matrix. The ligaments require load applied along their structural axis to maintain integrity and signal proprioceptive information to the brain. The menisci need the joint to track correctly through its range of motion to maintain their shock-absorbing position between the femoral condyles and the tibial plateau. All of this works beautifully when the walk is biomechanically correct. All of it degrades when the walk applies the wrong loads in the wrong directions through structures that are already reduced in their compensatory capacity by age. The knees that carry people through their 70s and 80s without significant limitation are not always the knees that were genetically exceptional. They are often the knees that were mechanically respected, that moved through decades of walking within the parameters their engineering was designed for, maintained by the muscles that were kept strong enough to absorb what the cartilage should not have to absorb alone. That outcome is not reserved for the athletic or the young. It is available to anyone who walks with the awareness of what correct walking mechanics protect and what the 7 mistakes quietly take away. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 mistakes you recognized in your own walking pattern. The answer may surprise you. And tell me whether your knees have been telling you something that you have been attributing to age rather than to mechanics. Because that conversation is exactly what the comment section here is for. Please share this video with someone whose walking routine is important to them and whose knees have been a source of concern, because the specific knowledge in this video is the difference between walking, working for the knee, and walking, working against it. And that difference, sustained over years of daily steps, is the difference between knees that carry you forward and knees that eventually stop you. Your knees were built for a lifetime of walking. Give them the walk they were built for.